I left town for a peaceful trip only to return early and find my private lakeside cabin listed online by the one person I trusted least, HOA. Karen, what happened next turned my quiet retreat into a legal storm she never saw coming. You ever just feel like you need to get away? Like the noise, the stress, the constant little fires of life just start stacking up until even your own home doesn't feel peaceful anymore. That's exactly where I was. Work had been insane. My deadlines. Meetings, emails at 2 a.m. from people who clearly don't understand time zones or boundaries. And on top of that, the one person who always found a way to make things worse was Karen. You probably know the type. HOA board member, always watching, always reporting every little thing, whether it's her business or not. So I made a decision. I said, you know what? I'm taking a break. Had this beautiful little lakeside cabin about 2 hours out of town. Nothing fancy, just quiet, peaceful, mine. No board meetings, no neighborhood drama, no Karen. I hadn't been out there in a while, but I kept it in great shape. It was my safe space, my reset button. I figured 1 week off the grid would do wonders. Before I left, I went through my usual checklist. Locked everything up tight, security system armed, motion sensors activated. It wasn't paranoia, just peace of mind. I wasn't expecting trouble, but I'd learned from past experience to never leave anything to chance, especially with someone. Like Karen living just a few houses down the road from my main residence, she'd always had this weird obsession with the cabin. She'd mention it randomly at HOA meetings, asking who maintained it, if I had permits for the dock, what I was planning to do with it, always something. Anyway, I packed light, just a few clothes, books, some snacks, my phone, of course, but I planned to use it as little as possible. That was the whole point: disconnect, decompress, disappear for a bit. I left early in the morning, and by the time I reached the cabin, I felt the weight lifting off my shoulders. No emails, no constant pings, just birds, breeze, and water. The first couple of days were exactly what I needed. I slept in, cooked breakfast slowly, read books that had been gathering dust for months. I didn't even bring my laptop. It was probably the first time in years I had been truly unreachable. I remember thinking this is what life is supposed to feel like. But even in the middle of that calm, something didn't sit quite right. Not at first. It was subtle. I got a notification from my cabin's smart system. It's just one. A motion alert. Could have been anything: a bird, maybe a squirrel. But it pinged me at 2:34 a.m. Odd. Still, I brushed it off. And the next day, another one, around noon. Front door sensor. I knew no one should be there. I was standing in the kitchen of my rental unit 2 hours away. Still, I figured maybe it was a glitch. But by the third notification, this one saying internal movement detected. I couldn't ignore it anymore. My brain started spinning. Did someone break in? But how? Locks were new. The cameras hadn't picked up anything unusual last time I checked. Maybe someone was just messing with the Wi-Fi? Maybe it was just a system error. I tried not to let it ruin my trip, but it stayed in the back of my mind like an itch I couldn't scratch. What made it worse was that I started remembering a conversation I had with Karen a few weeks prior. She asked if I ever thought of renting the cabin out. I told her flat out, no, it's not for that, and she laughed, like she didn't believe me. Or like she had other plans. At the time, I didn't think much of it. But now with the alerts, the sensors, that weird gut feeling, I started piecing things together. What if someone had gotten access? What if someone was in there right now, using it, staying there, renting? I pulled up the security cam feed, and at first everything looked normal. But the living room? The couch had been moved. My throw pillows were arranged differently. There were new shoes by the door, not mine. That's when it really hit me. Someone had been inside, recently, and not just for a look around. Thought of someone staying there without my knowledge, without permission? It made my skin crawl. That was my sanctuary. That was supposed to be untouchable. And suddenly it felt invaded. I knew I had to do something. So I decided to end my trip early. I packed up that night. Didn't tell anyone I was coming back. I wanted to catch whoever it was off guard, and deep down, something told me this wasn't just a random break-in. Something told me this had Karen written all over it. The drive back was quiet, but my mind definitely wasn't. I kept replaying the motion alerts, camera footage, the weird little changes in the cabin. It wasn't enough to call the police yet, but it was enough to know something shady was going on, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized this couldn't be random. I mean, who just stumbles into a lakeside cabin, rearranges things, and leaves shoes by the door? That's not some punk teenager breaking in for fun. It's someone treating the place like a rental, like they belong there. Halfway through the drive, I got curious. Just a hunch, honestly. I opened up Airbnb and typed in my cabin's zip code. It wasn't long before I found something. And when I saw the pictures, my stomach dropped. There it was. My cabin. My living room. My handmade wooden table. The string lights I installed last summer, all of it. The listing was live, with dates available, a full description, and glowing fake reviews. The host name, KR Properties, that alone was enough. For me to clench my jaw, I didn't need to guess what KR stood for. I clicked through the listing. She had even uploaded fresh photos, some I'd never taken. One showed a couple standing on the dock with drinks in hand, smiling, total strangers. That's when the pit in my stomach turned into full-blown rage. Not only had someone broken in, they'd been renting it out, taking pictures, and pretending it was theirs. This wasn't petty. This wasn't mischief. This was straight-up fraud. I immediately checked the reviews. There were 3. All recent, it's all clearly fake, with usernames like LakeLover88 and Couple in Retreat. Each one talked about how peaceful the host was, how clean the place felt, how perfect the view was for a weekend getaway. One even mentioned we met the host in person, and she was lovely, really. Because the only person living near the cabin besides me was Karen, it was all starting to make sense. Karen had always had this control thing. She treated the entire HOA like her personal empire. She once tried to fine a neighbor $500 for parking slightly crooked in their own driveway. I'd seen her stop joggers just to question whether they actually lived in the neighborhood. So, the idea of her seeing my empty property as wasted potential, I could see her justifying this to herself. And now, had evidence. Still, I didn't know if someone was staying there right now. The last book date on the listing said check out tomorrow. I started thinking, what if there are people there now? Tourists, a couple, maybe a family, who thinks they legally rented this place. They'd have no idea they were part of a scam. That thought chilled me more than anything else. I pulled up the app connected to the smart lock. Sure enough, it had been accessed. The access log showed a 4-digit code entered the day after I left, code I'd never given anyone. That's when I remembered I'd installed a backup mechanical lockbox on the side porch a year ago. Completely forgot it even existed. I had left an emergency key in there just in case my digital lock ever failed. Karen knew about it. I remembered showing it to her once during a storm when she offered to check on the cabin if the power went out. At the time, it felt like a neighborly gesture. Now it felt like I handed her the key to rob me blind. I hit the gas. I didn't even care about the groceries in the back seat anymore. So all I wanted was to get there, see for myself what was going on, and stop whatever madness she had put into motion. About 20 minutes out, I got another alert. Motion detected at the front door. Then the interior camera caught voices, people chatting, laughing. Definitely not Karen. Definitely not me. I couldn't hear every word. But one thing was clear. They thought they were on vacation, and I knew the exact moment this story flipped. It wasn't just about catching Karen anymore. It was about reclaiming my space, shutting this insanity down, making sure everyone involved knew exactly whose property they were in. So, I took a deep breath, cracked my knuckles on the steering wheel, and said out loud, "Okay, Karen, let's see what game you're really playing." I pulled into the driveway, and I knew instantly I wasn't overthinking this. I wasn't imagining anything. There were 2 SUVs parked outside my cabin. One of them had out-of-state plates. The porch lights were on. The place looked not like a break-in, not like a robbery. No broken windows, no signs of forced entry. Just clean, tidy, occupied. Like a rental. And I'm standing there in my own driveway, heart pounding, jaw clenched. staring at strangers casually unloading bags from their trunk like they'd just arrived at a weekend retreat. One of them had a cooler, another carried a bottle of wine. I could hear them laughing. One even said, "This place is nicer than the pictures." I stayed in the car for a minute, trying to wrap my head around what I was seeing. These people weren't thieves. They weren't squatters. They were guests. Guests who thought they had legitimately rented my lakeside cabin. That meant someone had illegitimately listed it. I stepped out and walked up the drive. The guests didn't even flinch. One of them smiled and said, "Hey, are you the host's friend?" I almost laughed right there. I said, "No, I am the owner of this property." "Who exactly told you this was available for rent?" You could see the confusion wash over them like a cold bucket of water. The guy with the wine bottle looked at his phone and said, "We booked it through Airbnb. KR Properties. Woman. Name Karen met us earlier to give us the code. She said she manages the place." I nearly lost it. She met them in person. She came out here. She used my lockbox, my emergency key, and handed my cabin over like it was a timeshare. I couldn't believe it. I asked, "Did she show you any proof she owned the cabin?" The woman shrugged. "No, I mean, the listing had good reviews. She gave us the access code and everything." That was it for me, I told them as calmly as I could. "Listen, you're not in trouble. But you've been scammed. I didn't rent this to anyone. Karen doesn't own it. She has zero authority to list it or give you any access. You're standing inside my home?" That's when the mood shifted. The group of guests looked panicked. The wine bottle guy actually apologized like he had broken in himself. They showed me the receiptful payment, non-refundable, for nights. They'd paid over $1,200. I told them they were victims too. I asked them politely to step outside while I went in. And the second I walked through that door, I could feel my blood boil. There were welcome baskets on the counter, with fruit, chocolates, and a handwritten card that said, "Thank you for choosing us." KR The living room was rearranged. My books were moved. My private items in the bedroom, stuff I never intended to be touched, were disturbed. One of my old photo albums was on the coffee table. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just criminal. This was personal. She had violated my space in the most intimate, calculated way, and it wasn't just the inside. I walked out back and saw signs she'd been marketing the place for weeks. Little laminated rule sheets were posted in the bathroom. Wi-Fi instructions were typed out and taped to the wall. There was even a QR code on the fridge for a local guidebook. Karen went all in. She'd created an entire rental business around my property. She had walked right into my life and set up shop as if it were hers. And here's the worst part. She didn't even try to hide it. She showed her face to the guests. She gave out her own contact info. I realized she had become so comfortable doing this that she didn't think twice about being traced. Either she thought I'd never find out, or she thought she could get away with it. Maybe both. I took pictures of everything. The setup, the fake welcome card, the altered furniture, the Airbnb page still open on one of the guests' phones. Everything. I wanted documentation. I wanted proof. Because Karen wasn't just stealing space, she was running a scam business off it. And I had had it. But then came the cherry on top. As I walked out to let the guests know they could wait on the porch until I sorted things out, guess who pulls up? Karen, wearing sunglasses, holding a clipboard, walking up like this, was just another Saturday check-in. And the moment she saw me standing there, her face dropped like a curtain. She froze, then immediately pulled out her phone, and with zero hesitation, right there in front of everyone, she called 911. Yeah, she called the cops. On me, at my own cabin. And I stood there thinking, this is about to get real. So there I was, standing on the front porch of my own cabin, watching Karen on the phone with 911, her voice rising like she was the one being wronged. She was pacing loud, dramatic, telling the dispatcher there was a strange man trespassing on her managed property. Yes, those were her exact words, managed property. Not owned, managed. That's how she tried to slide it past them. She wouldn't even look me in the eye. The guests, those poor folks, were just standing there wide-eyed, watching this unfold like a live courtroom drama. You could tell they were trying to make sense of it all. A few minutes ago, they thought they were on vacation. Now they were caught in some crazy legal mess between a fake host and the actual owner. I didn't interrupt her call. I let her finish. Let her dig her own hole. I stood there calm, hands in my pockets, letting every lie come out of her mouth while I held the ultimate trump card. Proof: the sheriff's department showed up in less than 10 minutes. Two deputies stepped out of the SUV and immediately asked, "Karen, what was going on?" She launched into her well-rehearsed speech, claimed, I was an aggressive squatter who had shown up out of nowhere, refused to leave, and was now threatening her guests. And the best part? She actually tried to act like she was protecting the guests. "They're scared," she said, pointing at them. He just appeared and started yelling, "I'm responsible for their safety." I almost laughed. When they turned to me, I didn't raise my voice. I simply handed over my driver's license, then my cabin deed, then my phone opened to the Airbnb listing that had her contact number listed under KR Properties. I showed the access log from the smart lock, even pointed out the welcome basket, inside signed by her. Then I said calmly and clearly, "Officers, this is my property. I own it." She broke in, accessed it using a backup lockbox key I had for emergencies, and she's been illegally renting it to strangers. These people didn't do anything wrong. They were misled. But she's trespassing. She's the one committing fraud. The mood shifted fast. The deputies took a step back, looked at her and asked, "Ma'am, do you have any documentation proving you own or are authorized to lease this property?" Her face went pale. She stammered something about managing it as a community asset and handling bookings as part of HOA oversight. That's when one of the officers stopped her and said, "Managing a listing requires legal authorization from the owner. Do you have a lease agreement? A contract? Anything with his signature?" Of course she didn't. At that point, it was game over. They asked her to step aside while they spoke to me privately. I explained everything, how I discovered the listing. The camera footage, the smart lock access, even the guests' receipts. One deputy nodded and said, "Sounds like you've got enough for a criminal complaint. Would you like to press charges?" I didn't even hesitate. Absolutely. Karen must have heard that because she immediately started trying to backpedal, said it was a misunderstanding, said she thought the place was abandoned. She even tried to guilt-trip the officers by saying she was just helping bring revenue to the area. I swear, you can't make this stuff up. The deputies asked the guests to pack up their things. They were unbelievably respectful about it. They even apologized to me. I assured them I wasn't mad at them, just at the person who scammed us all. One of them shook my hand and said, "I hope you sue her into the ground." I smiled and said, "Oh, don't worry, plan 2. Karen was told she needed to leave the property immediately and that a formal complaint would be filed. She tried to argue. Of course she did. Once the deputy told her she was lucky they weren't cuffing her on the spot for trespassing, she finally got the message. Watching her walk down the driveway, arms crossed, fuming but powerless, that was something I'll never forget. This was the woman who had spent years bullying people in HOA meetings, micromanaging paint colors and mailbox sizes. Now she was being escorted off the property she tried to steal control of, and I wasn't done. I contacted Airbnb that night. With everything, screenshots, documents, video footage, guest testimonies. Her account was suspended within 24 hours. The next morning, I called my lawyer. Because this wasn't just petty drama anymore. This was fraud, property invasion, illegal rental activity, and emotional distress. And let me tell you, the lawsuit we filed against her, it wasn't symbolic. It was $3 million worth of accountability. Because if there's one thing Karen underestimated, it's that I don't scare easy. After Karen was removed from the property, you'd think that would be the end of it. But no, that was just the beginning. What happened next was honestly more satisfying than I ever expected because she didn't just lose the battle that day. She lost everything she built her little power trip on. The very next morning, I called my lawyer, someone I've worked with for years and who doesn't play around. I laid out the whole situation. The break-in, the unauthorized rental, the fraudulent listing, the guests, the cops, everything. He didn't even blink. He said, "This is textbook property fraud, civil trespass, misrepresentation, and likely a violation of local rental ordinances. were filing. Today, we weren't just suing her for kicks. We were coming after her for every ounce of damage. Emotional distress, invasion of privacy, property misuse, fraud, and theft of rental income. He calculated everything what she earned, what I lost, what it would cost to repair my sense of safety and security. We filed for $3 million. Within a week, she was served. And the timing was poetic. She had just walked into an HOA board meeting like nothing ever happened, smug as always. She didn't even see the process server until the documents were in her hands. The entire room went silent. And she knew everyone. Knew it was over. It wasn't long before word spread. I didn't even have to say anything. People talk. And when the truth came out, neighbors started sharing their experiences. Turns out I wasn't the first person Karen had tried to intimidate, manipulate, or manage. One neighbor said Karen threatened to report her to code enforcement over a flower bed. Another revealed she fined them $250 for wind chimes. Wind chimes. No one liked her. They were just too scared to speak up until now. Her reputation, gone. Her little grip on the neighborhood, shattered. Within a month, she was removed from the HOA board entirely. Unanimous vote. No one even defended her. The same people she used to boss around were now sitting across from her, looking her dead in the eye, saying, "You're done." And the HOA? They sent me an apology, a formal letter. Admitted their policies didn't cover the abuse of power. Karen had pulled off and thanked me for exposing the cracks in their oversight. It was the first time I'd ever seen that board act like actual human beings instead of bureaucratic robots. Airbnb. They banned her account, blacklisted her email, IP, and even flagged her name for manual review across all listings. She tried creating a new host profile. Someone tipped me off, but it got flagged and removed instantly. Her days of being a fake property manager? Over? And me? I took time to fix what she broke, not just physically, but mentally. I replaced the locks, upgraded the cameras, got rid of anything she touched inside the cabin. I even sagged the place just for peace of mind. Yeah, I know how that sounds. But trust me, after someone violates your sanctuary, you do whatever it takes to make it feel safe again. But the best part, the part that still makes me smile, is this. She thought she could manipulate the system. She thought a title like HOA board member gave her power. She thought if she acted confident enough, no one would question her. But all that confidence, it was built on a lie. And when the truth showed up on her doorstep, she crumbled. Didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to threaten her. I let her dig her own grave with her greed and arrogance. All I had to do was show up early on, catch her red-handed. I still visit the cabin often now, more than I used to. And every time I pull into that driveway, I remember the chaos she caused. But more importantly, I remember how I took my peace back on my terms. Legally, calmly, completely. And that's the real story. She called 911 on me at my own cabin. She listed my property online, acted like she owned it, and thought no one would stop her. But she didn't count on one thing. I came home early,